Alright. It's been a minute. When we last left off, I believe we were going to go to Steban's meeting in the Cape Side Apartments. It is after 2200. So let's go ahead and do that.
As you approach the metal grille, you can hear several voices having what appears to be an animated discussion. This must be it. Beyond this door lies the beating heart of radical communism in Martinez. Somehow, the night air softens the smell of trash and sea brine. As the breeze pulls through the canvas like a shuttle through a loom, you catch a hint of something unexpected, something earthy, warm, and burnt. The acrid smell of failure. No, that's just slightly burnt coffee, a smell you would recognize anywhere.
Just look at these pigs sniffing about after hours.
Why didn't you say the secret door was right behind you?
Must have slipped my mind. You know how it goes.
She gives a lackadaisical shrug.
The metal grill is cool to the touch. You notice the lieutenant is looking uncustomarily anxious. His posture is rigid. His right hand hovers near the zipper of his jacket. He wants so badly to draw his armistice, but he also doesn't want to draw it.
You okay, Kim?
Oh, I'm fine. I was practically born to infiltrate underground communist cells.
He takes a quick look over his shoulder.
Which is just to say, we should be prepared for any eventuality.
The clang of metal reverberates all along the scaffolding. The voices coming from the other side fall silent. A pair of frightened hares cowering in some dark crevice of their burrow.
Who's there? Is that you, Maurice?
That's right, it is I, Maurice.
I'm crawling back already. Get out of here, traitor.
That's right. Take your minuscule bourgeois turnips and get lost.
Face it, sire. Your little subterfuge isn't leading anywhere.
I'm not actually Maurice. I'm trying to get organized. Can you help me?
For a moment, silence.
What's the passphrase?
It's Remember Dobreva and Abadanese.
There's no response. You begin to wonder whether they've slipped out some back way. No, they're still there. You can feel them back there.
Alright. The key's taped to the back of the door frame. Just make sure you put it back when you're done, or we'll all be locked out. And do watch the concrete. It just kind of falls away, in places.
Charmant. After you, detective.
Have fun at your underground meeting, pig. Hope it's a blast.
The two young men are either oblivious to or ignoring your entrance. Their attentions are fixed on whatever it is they're stacking in the middle of the floor. Matchboxes, it appears.
I think it's holding, Alexis.
It is. It's holding.
Careful, careful. Damn, hardly any difference.
The young man shakes his head and looks up to you and the lieutenant with barely concealed irritation.
You two, you are late.
They should know the meeting starts at 10 p.m. sharp.
His companion looks at you and squints.
One leader and one follower. The most ancient power dynamic. Just a moment. Could this be the former owner of a certain jacket you acquired recently? Don't let them see you flustered, sire. Play along.
Before we move on, do you recognize this jacket?
Hey, Steban. Isn't that your jacket?
What a coincidence. You two have the same jacket. What are the odds? Based on the prevalence of white Sarah-Mauritian suits in Martinaise, extremely low.
It certainly looks like my jacket, Alexis. Where did you get that, gendarme?
Must be a coincidence. I see these jackets all the time.
Unlikely. That's real Sarah-Mauritian twill. Only old Sarah-Mauritian communists and drug smugglers wear those anymore.
He is neither of those, of course. He is simply a poor student putting on airs. Also, he doesn't have the shoulders to fill out such a jacket.
See, Uli? It's just like Mazovrot. How does it go, gang?
Those committed to the rights of property are those most apt to violate them.
His companion nods emphatically.
Just a minute. Steban, Ulixis, why do those names ring the faintest of bells? Probably because they're the real names of Naztep and Exilus, the authors of that so-called essay about Tip-Top Tournay you read.
Yeah, the racing essay.
You should get to the bottom of this when you have the chance.
I assumed it was Maurice who broke into my room to play a trick on me. I didn't think I'd actually been raided by the RCM.
There is surprise in his voice, naturally, but is that a note of excitement you also detect?
Why do you sound excited to be raided by the RCM?
Oh, gendarme, because this is perfect. Can you imagine the look on Maurice's face when he finds out the RCM has been kicking my door down?
He'll shit himself. Positively.
And now they've shown up in force to break up our meeting.
He rubs his hands together excitedly.
Something tells me these young men are not very experienced with law enforcement.
Hold on. We're not here to break up your meeting. We want to join your meeting.
The RCM wants to join us?
My partner, of course, is acting in a strictly personal capacity, not as an official representative of the RCM.
Interesting. Does that mean you've done the reading?
Uh-oh. No one said anything about reading. You'll just have to wing this one.
The reading. Yes, I've definitely done that.
You have? Excellent. Let's hear your critique then.
I liked the characters and the plot.
Characters? What characters are you talking about?
It doesn't sound like they've done the reading, Steban.
Well, this is getting awkward. I'm not sure what you're expecting to find here then.
There's profound consternation in his voice. You suspect it's about something bigger than your not having done the reading.
Maybe they can explain themselves.
What were you doing with those matchboxes just now?
The young man frowns at the little pile of boxes on the floor.
Nothing, just messing around until the meeting started.
They're watching those matchboxes awfully intently for two guys who are just messing around. It's almost as though they were trying to create the most unstable structure they could, with predictable results.
You two wrote that article in La Fiume, didn't you?
You've read our article.
The first time since you've met the young man, words seem to desert him.
That I did not expect.
His companion is blushing now, a sheepish grin on his face.
The energy in the room has shifted ever so slightly in your favor. They're afraid they've somehow embarrassed themselves in front of you.
Well, don't keep us on tenterhooks. What did you think of the essay?
The delicate egos on these boys. Even though you're just some cop, they're desperate for your approval. Hey, you're not just some cop. You've got highly developed critical faculties. Now's your chance to show them off.
It was a good article. You should keep developing your ideas.
Well, of course that's just an initial foray into the subject. We're hoping to return to it for a more substantial treatment next term. In any case, I'm glad our piece found its audience. That's always the hope with these things, you know.
What exactly are you two doing here?
In the most generous sense, I would say we're cultivating revolutionary consciousness.
Yes, that's probably the best way to describe it.
But more specifically, we are running a reading group. The most rigorous and theoretically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez.
Comrade Steban is a great discussion leader, one of the best at the university.
It's obvious they take this group of theirs extremely seriously. Whatever you do, don't compare it to a common book club. Yawn. Can you imagine anything duller than a bunch of Beano-clads yanking each other's knobs?
Is this where I can square off in theory combat?
We have been known to get into some spirited debates, but it's always in service of our larger intellectual and ideological project.
Precisely. We are not interested in senseless parroting. We like to read critically.
Within the contours of Mazovian historical materialism, of course.
I didn't realize they taught radical Mazovian theory in the universities.
As though you can call that problem teaching.
One thing you learn quickly at university is that you're not going to find a real education in any lecture hall or discussion seminar.
We are post-attendance, basically.
Exactly. The only worthwhile part of the so-called École Normale de Recherche is the library. That's where we've made our greatest critical strides.
Okay, so what does your reading group actually read?
We study all the foundational texts of Mazovian theory, of course. Just last week we finished the second volume of Puncher and Watman's Innocence of Capital.
It's truly extraordinary.
And before that we spent 6 weeks on State and Plasm.
Uh-oh. You can feel your attention span rapidly deteriorating.
Let your mind wander.
Your attention detaches. The voices of the young men fade away. It's a cool evening, you notice.
Listen for night sounds.
Out beyond the dull chatter, you catch the sound of a distant seabird, and of course, the sound of the large stretches of canvas that cover the missing sections of wall. The way they billow in the night breeze reminds you of something.
A woman's skirt swelling in the breeze.
The thought is almost too much to bear. What you wouldn't give to glimpse the bare legs behind it. The more it hurts, the more you have to have it. Slowly, too slowly, the pain fades from your side. You turn your attention to the two young men, who appear just about finished.
And before that, there was Abelard's Impé Infernal.
But, of course, our special emphasis is on the theories of Ignace Nilsson and his followers, especially the inframaterialists.
Wait, who are the inframaterialists?
You're not familiar with them? It's pretty advanced stuff. You may not be ready for it yet, gendarme.
The two young men exchange skeptical side glances. Okay, but then who's this Ignace Nilsson guy?
Only Krasmazov's most trusted lieutenant, the evangelist of the revolution, and the founding father of the People's Republic of Samara.
It's hard to overstate how unimpressed he is that you've never heard of this world historical individual.
He also happens to be the greatest communist theorist after Mazov himself. It was Nilsson who first postulated the existence of ideological plasm, which forms the basis of inframaterialist theory.
The young man sighs. His companion looks about furtively.
Where is the rest of the reading group?
What do you mean? This is the reading group.
Shouldn't a group have, like, more people in it?
We're in something of a rebuilding phase.
Some of our former comrades didn't have the ideological fortitude our work demands.
Okay, but what happened to them?
Intellectual attrition is maybe the best way to describe it. Felix said he couldn't keep up with the reading on top of his classwork. And Susanna wanted to read text other than Mazovian theory. Like novels, if you can believe it.
Imagine the audacity of wanting to read a novel in a reading group.
Maybe you just haven't found the right group yet.
We've tried recruiting new members, but unfortunately the current intellectual climate is pretty hostile to inframaterialist thought. These days, if you're on the left, the ascendant schools are the Godwaldians and their iconoclasts.
Don't forget about Maurice and the turnips.
Right. Then there was the whole turnip debacle.
Whatever this turnip business is about, one thing is perfectly clear. These young students have a much deeper understanding of communism than you do. You could learn a thing or two from them. If you can convince them, you're one of them.
What about Cindy? Is she part of the group?
Cindy is... how to describe her role?
Something of an ideological auxiliary, perhaps.
Yes, that's exactly how I would put it. And naturally, we support her radical counter-liberal aesthetics.
But she refuses to submit an essay, so we can't call her a member of the group per se.
That doesn't stop her from using the room for studio space, of course.
What's so bad about the Gottwaldians?
They're the most depressing school of communism. They love writing long books with a patina of Mazovian theory to cover up their cheap psychologizing.
A gang of cheap psychologists and intellectual midgets. Typical Gottwalders, in other words.
It's okay for Uli to say that, because his dad is from Gottwald.
What's so depressing about their theories?
The Gottwald school believe that intellectuals as a class are capable of sparking revolutionary change. So all they can do is critique capitalism from inside itself.
In other words, they have lost faith in their own relevance.
That's why they spend all their time smoking cigarettes and writing long works of criticism that make you want to commit suicide.
That sounds miserable.
It is miserable. That's probably why they're always committing suicide. You see, the Gottwald school look like communists. They talk like communists. But scratch the patina and you'll see beneath that they're just depressed liberals who've read too many books.
Okay, and what about the iconoclasts?
For starters, they love talking about beans.
What's wrong with beans? I like beans.
Oh, sure. But iconoclasts are obsessed with beans. They love thinking about beans. They love counting beans. But most of all, they love building models to predict how many beans there'll be in the future.
Nota bene, iconoclast is an extra pejorative form of the already pejorative name Mazovian economists, a moderate school of Mazovianism which advocates the gradual transition to communism through carefully managed economic modernization rather than violent social revolution.
They're by far the most bean-centric school of communism.
Ah yes, the much maligned bean counters, ensconced in their think tanks and high-rises, believing they can save the world through a series of incremental, assiduously technocratic reforms.
But isn't it good to know how many beans there are?
See? You're already falling for that scarcity logic. You start off assuming there aren't enough beans to go around. So naturally you want to cut the bean rations in half. And next thing you know, there are budget cuts, so now we've got to cut the bean rations in half again. You see, iconoclasts claim to be communists, but in reality they're just liberals with hard-ons for spreadsheets.
And what about the liberals? Are they liberals too?
Of course not. The only people who actually call themselves liberals are mouth-foaming reactionaries.
Basically indistinguishable from fascists. You'd need an X-ray machine to tell the difference.
Did you say something about turnips?
It's an unfortunate story. You see, our ex-comrade Maurice is something of an economist.
He's studying macro and microeconomics.
Wow, a real intellectual, it sounds like.
The lieutenant arches his eyebrows.
Right. So a few weeks ago we were discussing the extra physical capabilities of the revolutionary state. And Maurice said... What were his exact words, Ulex's?
It was unbelievable. He said, turnips don't care if they are grown by communists, moralists, or Vulcan. They grow just the same.
Basically, he was rejecting the whole foundation of inframaterialist theory.
What is this inframaterialist business they keep blathering about? You've never heard of anything like it.
Remind me what inframaterialist theory says about turnips again?
Simply that under suitably revolutionary conditions, crop yields naturally increase relative to non-revolutionary crops, which Morris somehow has the gall to deny.
Susanna said that he has been hanging out with some non-communists lately.
For us, the question boiled down to, if you don't even accept the basic ideas of Nielsen and inframaterialist theory, why are you in the reading group?
So you expelled Maurice from the reading group over an argument about turnips?
Well, it wasn't so much that he was expelled.
He just quit coming. We haven't seen him around for weeks.
I've heard enough. Let's talk about something else.
Go ahead.
Did this reading group have anything to do with the lynching?
Lynching? No. We're not an operational cell.
We think of ourselves as more of an intellectual vanguard.
Are you sure? My working theory right now is that communism killed the hanged man.
To be clear, communism is not an official suspect in this investigation, because it's not a person, you see.
Seems unlikely from a strictly inframaterialist perspective.
Comrade Ulix is right. The amount of plasm required to strike down an ideological enemy outright is enormous. We're talking second-level effects, at a minimum.
Or even third.
What are these levels they're talking about? This doesn't sound like any communism you've encountered before.
In any case, it's not like the SRV has established a party line on the subject of lynchings in Martinez.
The two men look at each other.
The SRV refers to the People's Republic of Samara, established as a socialist utopia by survivors of the revolution. It has since degenerated into a bureaucratic worker state under the decades-long rule of President Sapormat Sport Kenazinski.
Though historically speaking, the SRV has supported direct action against right-wing paramilitary squads, especially when they are doing the Indo-tribes' dirty work.
Good point. So as a provisional matter, I can say we support it.
It's not that the boundary between sarcasm and sincerity is porous with these two. It's that they actually seem to overlap, as though one is meant to conceal the other. It's always that way. Beneath the crust of irony, there's a molten sincerity that threatens to erupt forth. You may witness it yet.
Is your reading group affiliated with the Union somehow?
No, we're an independent organization. We acknowledge and respect the Union's efforts, but our interests are more theoretical than Mr. Clare's.
He speaks the truth.
So what's your stance on crime in general?
That's easy. Crime is simply the inevitable expression of the injustice and incoherence embedded within capitalism itself.
Delivered with the smug assurance of a schoolboy reciting a maxim he's committed to memory.
It's a symptom, in other words, not a cause.
He waves his hand as though this is all there is to say on the subject of crime.
His companion can barely suppress a yawn.
Are there any operational communists in Martinez?
No, unfortunately. The communards were hunted down and killed nearly to a man. All that's left of them are bones and old rifles.
Oh, like this one. We'll show him the Belle Magrave rifle.
His companion's eyes widen as you hold up the ancient weapon. He's practically itching to stick that thing in someone's face and pull the trigger.
Yes, like that one. I wonder how many of these are still lying around in cellars or sealed up behind the masonry.
He knits his brows together and then looks up.
Can I hold it?
Here.
It's heavier than I was expecting.
The rifle rests in his open palms. Its position reminds you of something.
Though what, exactly, you can't say. He turns the rifle over again, admiring the glint of light off the oily barrel. When he's finished, he returns the rifle to you with a nod of appreciation.
Is the reading group accepting new members?
We typically only accept new members once per semester. There's this whole process with essays and presentations on assigned topics.
The young man turns to his companion.
But given that we have some extra seating at the moment, I guess we could be convinced to expedite an application or two.
Steban, you can't be serious. For these gendarmes?
I am serious. As materialists, we've got to adapt to conditions as they are. Besides, he'll still need to pass the interview portion of the entrance process. Assuming he's even still interested, that is.
Composure, impossible. Convince him you belong in the reading group.
Is it getting warm in here? There seems to be a little pool of sweat forming in the depression of your lower back.
It's because I don't do well on interviews.
No, You're terrible at them. The thought of everyone looking at you, judging you, makes you want to heave, frankly.
Definitely not sweating. No, sir.
Excellent work. Now there's a dark handprint on the back of your shirt. Everyone will be able to see the evidence of your overactive sweat glands.
Why am I getting so worked up? They're just a couple of kids.
Let's be frank. They're probably way smarter than you. You bet they've read more books than you can even name. You've been quite studious these past few days. You should be able to handle whatever they want to throw your way. The hardest part will just be working up the nerve to ask without soiling yourself.
Everything all right, gendarme? You look a little green about the gills.
That's enough for tonight. Will you still be here if I have more questions?
Sure, we're here most every night. Maybe we'll catch you again.
Sleep well, gendarme.
Coffee. At the bottom of the pot, an aisle of black sludge rises from a shadowy sea. Try not to think about the cracks spidering out across the floor. A rickety easel surrounded by pots of gauche. Cindy's, no doubt. Could it be the phasmid? No, probably not. This one says, "No war but class war." This poster reads, "Under the cobblestones, communism." We'll have to give that skill check another go a different night.
Hello again, officers. Have you come to admire my mural?
Piss faggot and fuck the world send their best.
I don't believe it. I've never known those boys to have manners.
The bemusement in her voice doesn't fully mask genuine tenderness.
They seem to hold you in high esteem.
They'll never be skulls, but their hearts are in the right place.
Skulls are cool. Can I be a skull?
Fat chance. But you can still do your part to revitalize the neighborhood.
But I really want to be a skull.
She throws you a conspiratorial glance, then presses her finger to her lips and squints up at the sky, as though straining to hear something.
Have you noticed the quiet? Every so often, you might hear a gunshot pierce the air somewhere in Jamrock. But in Martinez, no gunshots, no sirens. The people are languishing in boredom and complacency. This place is a sepulchre. We'll paint it red. We bring the raucous. You bring the sirens.
And on that note, we will call it there and keep it brief as we near the end of day 4.